nigh.
Human brains are naturally wired to sort of cap catastrophe. Like we just have a limit.
Right, a cognitive limit.
Exactly. When you hear about something like the Black Death or, you read history books about the sheer devastation of World War II, you instinctively categorize it. We put this mental fence around the horror so it fits into our understanding of how the world occasionally breaks down.
Yeah, we have to contextualize it just to process it.
Right. But today, in this deep dive, we are pulling from a stack of biblical commentaries, historical analyses, and, frankly, population mathematics to examine a blueprint for an event that completely shatters that scale.
Oh, absolutely shatters it.
So our mission today is to look at the mechanics of the fourth seal. This is found in Revelation chapter 6. And I want to be clear right up front for you listening. We are examining a literal systemic anatomy of global collapse.
And that forces a total shift in how you process the idea of an apocalyptic event. Because, when you strip away the heavy symbolism and the pop culture interpretations that usually surround this text, you are left with a highly specific sequence of civilizational rupture.
A completely terrifying sequence.
Truly. We are talking about an extinction-level event that mathematically dwarfs every historical catastrophe you just mentioned combined. And the chilling part, the most chilling part is the velocity. This is outlined as executing in a matter of mere months.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we follow the pattern of the first three seals in the source text, the Lamb breaks the fourth seal. Then the fourth living creature, which is a cherubim, summons the rider. And right away, the text gives us a singular distinction. Out of all the horsemen in Scripture, this is the only one given an explicit identity. His name is Death.
Which is a massive narrative pivot. I mean, think about the first three riders. They represent forces, right? Conquest, war, famine.
Right, the actions that destabilize a society.
Exactly. But the fourth rider is the ultimate consequence personified. By giving this rider a name, the text establishes the core mechanics of how a planetary rupture of this magnitude physically unfolds. It really demands that you ask, how does an extinction event of this scale actually happen in the real world?
And the visual identity given to this rider is, it's terrifyingly specific. If you look at the first three horses, they are described with pretty standard symbolic colors, right? White, red, and black.
Standard archetypes, yeah.
But this fourth horse has a biological color. The Greek word used in the ancient text is chloros. It translates to ashen or a pale, sickly green. And, I always assumed that was just a poetic metaphor for fear, like someone turning pale when they're scared.
Sort of losing the color in your face.
Yeah. But when you look at the medical reality, chloros is the literal bloodless color of a decomposing human corpse. It is the exact color of biological rot.
Yeah.
The text is forcing you to look at the physical aftermath of mass casualties.
Yeah, you aren't just seeing a symbol of mortality anymore. You are being confronted with the actual mechanics of decomposition. So Death arrives, but he isn't just, some rogue agent. That command from the cherubim, the come part, that seems crucial to how the text frames the entire event.
It's extremely crucial.
It doesn't present this mass extinction as random bad luck or just chaotic nature running amok.
Well, that goes right to the core of the text's underlying theology. God directs this death as a form of divine judgment.
So it's heavily authorized.
Yeah. The authority given to this writer emphasizes that this is a deliberate unveiling initiated directly from the heavenly throne. Death is summoned. It is authorized.
It has a specific mandate.
Right. And a defined jurisdiction. From a narrative perspective, it changes how you view the catastrophe. It isn't a tragedy of circumstance. It is a structured, clinical execution of an apocalyptic blueprint.
It's clinical, sure, but it's also logistically horrifying. Because Death, despite being the only named rider, does not actually ride alone.
No, he brings company.
The text introduces a chilling partnership to handle the aftermath. Right behind Death, following so closely they are essentially moving as a single unit, is Hades.
And Hades is a fascinating addition here.
Yeah, because the text characterizes Hades not necessarily as a fiery underworld, but essentially as the grave, or like the ultimate cosmic gravedigger.
This raises an important question about why ancient texts personified the grave in the first place. In antiquity, leaving a body unburied was considered a profound horror, an ultimate curse.
A total disgrace.
Exactly. But when you are dealing with the execution of 1.75 billion people, traditional burial customs become mathematically impossible.
There's just no way.
Right. So death is the action. But Hades is the destination. Death takes the biological life, while Hades immediately expands its borders to claim the resulting bodies.
Like a horrifying efficiency.
It is. The text references concepts found in other ancient writings, like Job and Isaiah, where the grave is this vast, dark, all-consuming mouth that is just never satisfied.
To help you visualize this duo, think of death as the grim harvester swinging the scythe, relentlessly cutting down the biological life. But the scythe only leaves the crops on the ground, right?
Right, it doesn't clean them up.
Exactly. So Hades is the massive, inescapable silo, or the ultimate cleanup crew following right behind, sweeping up the staggering volume of bodies.
That's a great analogy.
The specific role of this partnership is to illustrate a mortality rate so overwhelmingly plentiful that it would seem as if the entire surface of the earth had simply dissolved into an open graveyard.
And that dissolution of boundaries is the real terror here. The text suggests the scale is so massive that the line between the world of the living and the realm of the dead essentially vanishes.
They just bleed together.
Yeah, Hades isn't waiting underneath the earth anymore. It is operating right on the surface, directly alongside death.
So if the earth is being transformed into a graveyard, the natural question is, how do they actually pull this off? They don't just wave a magic wand.
No, it's very systematic.
The text outlines a highly specific cascading sequence of global collapse. God grants Death and Hades the authority to use an arsenal of 4 specific weapons.
The sword, famine, plague, and wild beasts.
Right. Number 1, the sword, representing war. Number 2, famine. Number 3, plague or pestilence. And number 4, wild beasts. And what the source material describes is a relentless domino effect.
One triggers the next.
Exactly. War inevitably destroys the infrastructure, which triggers famine. Famine weakens the population, which invites plague. And plague drives mass death.
It's a brutal cycle.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because this sequence feels incredibly modern. Even today, we watch geopolitical war immediately threaten global food supply chains.
You blockade the ports, cut off the grain, and people starve.
Yes. Then the resulting malnutrition and the breakdown of sanitation create the perfect breeding ground for disease. It feels like a 21st century understanding of civilizational collapse.
Well, I'd actually challenge the idea that this is a uniquely modern insight.
Oh, really? How so?
We tend to view fragile supply chains as an invention of globalized capitalism, but the Roman Empire relied on incredibly complex, highly fragile grain shipments from Egypt just to feed its population.
Okay, that makes sense.
The ancients understood perfectly well that if you sever the grain route, the empire starves, and when an empire starves, disease follows. It's not a modern concept, it's a structural human vulnerability.
So they knew exactly how the dominoes would fall.
Oh, definitely. When invading armies in the ancient world burned agricultural fields, the resulting famine wasn't an accidental side effect. It was the weapon itself.
So the text is really laying out a mathematically sound progression. The sword doesn't have to literally strike down 1.75 billion people. It just has to break the system.
Exactly. It's the exact opposite of magic. It is a horrifyingly logical chain reaction. Once supply lines are severed, famine does the heavy lifting.
Because people just can't fight off illness.
Right. The human body requires a massive amount of caloric energy just to maintain an immune system. Once millions of bodies are weakened by starvation, and they are packed together in whatever crumbling cities remain, the immune defense drops to 0.
And then the third weapon hits.
Pestilence. It sweeps through that population like a spark in a dry forest. It just compounds.
Okay, let's look at that compounding effect. War, famine, plague, that totally tracks. I can see the historical parallels, but I have to admit I get completely tripped up on the 4th weapon in the text's arsenal.
The wild beasts.
Yeah, wild beasts. It feels totally out of place. Are we really supposed to imagine a literal zoo breakout? Packs of starving wolves roaming the streets of New York or London?
I mean, it sounds a bit out there.
It feels like a B-movie trope compared to the grim realism of the first 3 weapons.
It does sound jarring at first glance, which is exactly why it sparks so much intense debate among scholars. The source material outlines 3 distinct theories regarding what these wild beasts actually represent.
Okay, what's the first one?
They all hinge on what happens when a society is hollowed out by a massive death toll. The first theory is the most literal, actual wild animals.
So the zoo breakout theory.
Well, more like nature reclaiming the space. If human infrastructure collapses from the war, famine, and plague, the normal food supply for wildlife is also interrupted. Furthermore, the human noise and activity that normally keep predators at bay just vanish.
So they get bold.
Right. Starving, desperate animals are forced to move into ruined human settlements to scavenge. Nature essentially reclaims the hollowed-out cities, and humans become prey.
Which is a terrifying visual, nature turning on humanity because the environment is fundamentally broken. But the source material also offers a second theory, right? One that shifts away from animals entirely.
Yes, the metaphorical interpretation.
This theory suggests that the wild beasts represent brutal, violent dictators. We know from history that when civil order collapses under the weight of an extensive death toll, political power structures shatter. The police, the courts, the institutions, they just cease to exist.
And that political vacuum is the core of the metaphorical theory. The text might be describing the socio-economic unrest that follows the total breakdown of government.
Where people just turn on each other.
Exactly. When systems fail, autocratic regimes and warlords step into the void, violently asserting power to maintain control over whatever resources are left. You see followers of these antichrist-like figures ruling by pure force and brutality.
So the leaders themselves are the beasts.
Yeah. In ancient literature, hostile empires and tyrannical leaders were frequently depicted as beasts. Predators in human form tearing apart the weak. So the fourth weapon could literally be humanity itself, stripped of all laws, reverting to a feral predatory state.
Wow, so you either have literal wolves at the door or warlords acting like wolves. But the source material points out a third theory, one that looks at the beast from a microscopic perspective.
And this one is very compelling.
The text suggests this third option actually presents the strongest case for how a 1.75 billion death toll could be achieved so rapidly.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture of historical mass extinction, the microscopic theory really makes sense. This theory argues the text is referring to animal-borne pandemic plagues, zoonotic diseases.
Like pathogens jumping species.
Exactly. We are talking about pathogens like swine flu, bird flu, AIDS, or Ebola, which cross over from the animal kingdom into humanity. And the mechanics of civil collapse make this crossover highly likely.
Because people are desperate.
Yes. When agriculture fails, starving populations push deep into wild habitats to hunt for alternative food sources, exposing themselves to novel animal viruses.
And because the population's immune system is already decimated by the famine we just talked about, a novel animal virus would encounter zero biological resistance.
Precisely. The timeline makes zoonosis the most logical culprit. Disease kills exponentially faster than conventional war.
So it fits the rapid pace of the prophecy.
Yeah, if you are looking at the brief window over which this mass extinction is supposed to happen, a fast-moving, highly contagious animal-borne pathogen fits the parameters perfectly.
That totally makes sense.
But the source text doesn't mandate that you have to choose just one theory. It leaves room for a terrifying synthesis. You could have warlords fighting for control, starving predators encroaching on the suburbs, and zoonotic viruses sweeping through refugee camps, all striking simultaneously.
The threats are multifaceted.
Absolutely.
So here's where it gets really grim. We've explored the weapons, the sword, the famine, the plague, the beasts, but the true terror of the fourth seal lies in the sheer mathematical scale and where this specific event sits on the overall prophetic timeline.
The numbers are just staggering.
The text states that authority is given to death in Hades over a fourth of the Earth's population, 1/4.
Let's do the math on that. Based on a modern global population of roughly 7 billion people, a quarter of the Earth equates to 1.75 billion dead.
Just pause and think about the logistics of that number for a second. We throw around the word billion so easily when talking about economics.
We do.
But 1.75 billion casualties is the equivalent of entirely emptying out the continents of North America, South America, and Europe. Every single person gone.
It is a scale of mortality that the human mind is fundamentally not equipped to process. To ground it, the source material draws comparisons to the greatest tragedies in recorded human history.
Like World War II.
Right. World War II, a conflict that spanned the globe and utilized industrialized slaughter, took an estimated 60 million lives over 6 years.
And then there's the 1918 flu.
Yes, the 1918 influenza pandemic, which was heavily accelerated by the troop movements and supply chain breakdowns of World War I, which is a perfect example of the domino effect we discussed. That took around 30 million lives.
And the bubonic plague, too.
The Black Death, exactly. It wiped out over a quarter of 14th century Europe, fundamentally altering feudal economics, shifting borders, and redefining human psychology.
And the Black Death took several years to achieve that. But if you combine the death tolls of World War II, the 1918 flu, and the Black Death, the fourth seal eclipses all of those combined by a massive margin.
It's a completely different stratosphere of destruction.
The time frame compounds the horror, doesn't it? This mass extinction happens over a very brief period.
According to the text's chronological sequence, it occurs during the final months of the first half of the apocalypse.
Wait, the first half?
Yeah, it acts as the culmination of the four horsemen. You have the white, the red, the black, and finally this pale green horse. The completion of these four riders' campaigns officially kicks off what the text defines as the Great Tribulation, the ultimate time of sorrow.
So what does this all mean for the broader narrative of the text? If 1.75 billion people dying is just the end of the first act, where does it go from there?
Well, this is perhaps the most chilling insight contained within the source material. Despite the fourth seal bringing about the greatest mass extinction in the history of the world, it is framed merely as the prologue to the nightmare.
That is deeply unsettling.
Seal 5 marks the midpoint of the apocalypse, and Seals 6 and 7 open up a period of catastrophic doom that the text insists is far greater than everything that has come before.
So it actually gets worse.
The pale horse, death, the expanding borders of Hades, the 1.75 billion unburied dead, all of that is just setting the stage. It is the dismantling of human infrastructure so that the final judgments can commence without resistance.
Let's bring this all together and recap the journey we've taken through this ancient blueprint. We started with the terrifying summoning of the bloodless pale horse, its sickly green color signaling a biological end.
Right, the chloros.
We looked at how this wasn't random chaos, but an event initiated by deliberate divine authority from the throne. Then we explored the terrible efficiency of death harvesting the biological life, while Hades acted as the inescapable silo, expanding to swallow a quarter of the earth.
A quarter of the earth. Just incredible.
We broke down the cascading collapse, that mathematically sound domino effect where the sword severs the supply lines, causing famine, which destroys the immune system, opening the door for plague.
And we examined the enigma of the wild beasts.
Yeah, whether they are literal predators, autocratic warlords filling the political vacuum, or microscopic zoonotic pathogens. And finally, we confronted the staggering math. A death toll of 1.75 billion people that dwarfs our worst historical tragedies, yet serves only as the midpoint of the prophetic timeline.
Imagine your own city in that wreckage. Imagine you've somehow survived the shattering of that historical scale we talked about at the very beginning. You are standing in the planetary graveyard, the infrastructure is gone, the Pale Rider has finished his harvest, only to realize the worst is still on the horizon. When you look at our interconnected modern world with its fragile global supply chains, its reliance on centralized agriculture, and the delicate nature of civil order, well, makes you wonder.
It really does.
If one gear slips, does the whole machine still break?
Yeah.
Is the cascading domino effect described thousands of years ago in this text still, ultimately, the greatest threat humanity faces today?
9.